Good morning again. I'm still Reverend Alice Reed, and I'm still the spiritual leader here at Centers for Spiritual Living, and I want to extend a special welcome to you as you're watching this broadcast. We are really excited to be having our annual meeting coming up next Sunday, so I hope you'll join us. We'll say more about that later, but I wanted to give it a quick mention now. It will be at 12 o'clock, and there'll be some more information after when we get to the announcements part of our morning. So our July theme has been Unchained Spirituality, and it was put together by some of our younger minds and hearts in our movement, and so it was a group of some of the regeneration folks who put this month's themes together. And today's talk is The Truth Will Set You Free. And as I listen to Faith's words, as I listen to what she was singing about, I couldn't help but be drawn in to this idea about holding a vision, holding it tight, and being sure to keep our eye on what it is that is pulling us forward. And so when I think about this idea of the truth will set you free, there's a couple of questions that come up for me. One is, whose truth? Is it your truth, or is it my truth? Is it Stacy's truth, who's our engineer today? Whose truth will set us free? So we need I want to kind of look at that. And then the other thing that comes up for me is this dilemma that there seems to be a lot of people saying things are true, and yet they're sometimes opposing ideas. So what is true anymore, right? Are you getting the same experience I'm getting? We have people who are really invested in ideas and they call them truth. And that doesn't feel freeing to me at all. So I want to explore that a little bit. And then the third question that I want us to explore is, where does one look for truth? Where does one look for truth? So the thing that I've sort of already mentioned is that I'm seeing a whole lot of disrupting out there in our nation right now, especially in the U.S. There's a lot of contention, there's a lot of divisiveness, and it seems to me that many of us are trying to resurrect all the old paradigms that seem to be dissolving or evaporating, and depending upon how attached to you, it can feel like they're being shattered. And yet, if we continue to reach into our past, I think it's harder for us to really access what it is that wants to be known by us, what it is that wants to be experienced, what newness is trying to be presented right now. And so, what I've noticed is that it's the fear that tends to keep us attached to what was, right? It's the fear of the unknown. It's the fear of not knowing what, the uncertainty. I think a couple of weeks back I shared with you this idea of VUCA, right? VUCA is when we are dealing with a lot of variables. There's a lot of, things that are changing constantly. There's a lot of uncertainty. V is the high amount of variables. The U is uncertainty. The C, I wish I'd written this down. The C is a lack of consistency. I'm actually using some different words. I'm sure this isn't it. And then the ambiguity. So in this time right now, as we deal with this pandemic, as we deal with this uncertainty that's coming up for us, and the things are moving, and we've been making plans here with our tech team and with our COVID safety team to try to open up our sanctuary to you. And that date keeps changing because the environment keeps changing. And I'm imagining you have your own things that keep coming up for you, things that you expected to be able to do that you can't do, or things that you can do that you couldn't do before. I had a wonderful 2020 planning calendar that I put together at the end of last year, and we were going to launch it this year. And what's that saying that, we make plans and God laughs? And then I went and I tried to revitalize that plan for the next 6 months, and things changed again. And so I think we have to stay flexible. I think we have to begin to just roll with it, because we're in this time of great change. When the pandemic first came up and we were all asked to shelter in place, I imagine a lot of you were like me in that there was this hope that was being born about maybe something new would transpire, and there'd be some breakthrough in the way the world works and the way we relate to each other, and we would create a greater peace and greater continuity and greater love amongst ourselves. And what started to show up was greater divisiveness. And then we had the whole anti-racism movement that popped up when the straw that broke the camel's back was the police brutality and the death of George Floyd. And so rather than this instant utopia that I was really fantasizing about, there was more change to deal with. And it's a little exhausting sometimes, don't you agree? I know I can get a little tired. And so listening to, if I go back to Faith's song about being strong, and I'm just going to quote her here, "Be strong, hold tight to the vision. No one can ever take it away from you. Be strong, live your life in passion. You got to keep on and hold tight to the vision." There's a deep wisdom saying, and I'm sure you've heard it before, but I'm going to repeat it right now, that pain pushes and vision pulls. And so I think Faith's song really reminds us that even in these times when we might be feeling pushed by pain, that it's important to remember our vision. It's important to remember what's really pulling us forward. And when I reflect on my own vision, when I first got introduced to Science of Mind, I'd been on the spiritual path for a while, and I came to what was then called religious science, which is now called Centers for Spiritual Living. And I think my vision was kind of small at first. My vision was felt like an opportunity or a promise of wholeness that I didn't know. I saw other people who were experiencing greater wholeness in their life, and so I was very excited about this idea of really feeling connected with myself and feeling whole and feeling like my past hurts didn't have to always haunt me. And in the beginning, when we begin to see our vision, I think it grows as we grow. And as I began to grow, my vision began to grow. My vision began to grow from this idea of healing from my past hurts to feeling safe in the world. And then I began to have a vision that, as it broadened and as it evolved, of feeling like I could help create that same safety for other people. I could help to create that same space for other individuals so that they felt centered and they felt their own wholeness. But a really big vision needs to continue to evolve and grow for us, so that, at least for me, what I've seen is that my vision has broadened, and I've gotten very excited, and I would say I fully embrace now this beautiful vision of a world that works for everyone. So if I sort of superimpose my own movement in growth, I can see that Centers for Spiritual Living has been on a similar trajectory. That when this movement was first started, it was really began as a self-empowerment movement, a movement where we would start within, where we could learn about the power within ourselves, and we could begin to experience and then to express a greater wholeness in our lives, in our well-being, in our health, in our wealth, all those things that are very personal to us. And yet I think our movement is evolving right now into a movement that is not just focused on the individual, but all lives. And I would venture to say that what we're experiencing out in the world, and especially in the U.S., is reflective of this desire for, if you listen to any of Marianne Williamson, she does a great job of talking about how we were the me generation, and now we need to be the we generation, that the New Thought movement and spiritual enlightenment movement was really about self-enlightenment. And yet there comes a time when we become stronger and more confident in our own wholeness and our own well-being, then it's time to stand on that firm foundation and begin to try to create a world that works for everyone, so that other people can have that experience of well-being, of wholeness. And what I've noticed in this movement since I've been involved in it is that we have indeed been leaning towards that. In the last 20 years, not only did we have two organizations that integrated into one, because, hey, we teach oneness, why aren't we one organization? So that happened in the last 20 years. And then we came up with this beautiful vision of a world that works for everyone. And I think that the vision is bigger than we expected, right? We knew it was a big vision, but I think there might have been some hope that it was going to be all, love and light and rainbows and unicorns. But in order for us to really step into a vision that large, there are things that have to dissolve and break down. And that's what I'm experiencing, both personally in my own heart and as I look out in the world. I think that the dissonance that we're experiencing oftentimes is really just there to tease out that greater good that wants to be known by us. I also think that this idea of personal truth really does have to come first for all of us. And if you look around, if you're following the news, if you're following social media, we teach that we create our own reality, right? We teach that we have our own truth. And if you look around, there's a lot of people who are standing in their own truth right now. And that's caused a little bit, maybe a lot of dissonance in the world. But I think it's part of the process. I think it's part of the process. One of the places that I've had to catch myself is in looking at the things that are important to me, the things that I might be referring to as my values, and then not seeing them in someone else's outpicturing, not seeing my values being espoused in someone else's truth. And so it's tempting to say, that's not true. But I think the greater call of the growing edge is to look past the circumstance, not to excuse it, not to be okay with it, but to try to go deeper to find a truth that we can all agree on. And so while you will hear me both on social media and through my talks and through classes, you'll hear me talk about the things that are not okay with me, and that I won't be silent when I see injustice, and I won't be silent when I know that there's a greater good that wants to be known by us. But at the same time that I am calling out a greater truth, I have to bring love. And those two things have to be balanced if we're truly going to create a world that works for everyone. Because if I go out in my corner and I say, well, this is the truth and your truth is not the truth, and so you just need to go to HE double toothpicks. If I'm really going, boy, I cleaned that up. If I'm going to do that, I'm just creating more separation. And then I'm buying into this idea of separation. And if we really believe in oneness, and if we really believe in a world that works for all, then that world is there's got to be some common ground that we come to where the world works for me, and it also works for our perceived enemies. It also works for our perceived opposites. So you won't find me doing a lot of, I'll call it political trashing. You won't find me doing a lot of that. Because while I'm choosing to stand in my truth, I'm also choosing to stand in love. And so when we look at those three questions that I started out with, whose truth, your truth or my truth, when we look at those, I think that we really start with our individual truth until we're ready to explore global truths. And that's really what we're seeing in the world right now. People are beginning to really explore their personal truths. Some of us are a little further along on the trajectory than others. And I think while we stand for justice and while we stand for the most loving thing that can happen for humanity, I think we need to find loving ways to help people catch up, not to our truth, but to a more global truth. Maybe there's a truth that's even bigger than the truth that I think I'm holding. A case in point, I'm right now studying the work of Layla Saad in Me and White Supremacy. And this is a book that is a journal book, and so it's more than just reading information. I'm actually needing to journal and to explore my own biases. And what I'm beginning to learn is that I don't know what I don't know. Like if I say that this is my truth and I decide to camp out here, I'm not necessarily seeing the whole truth because I'm still experiencing a world that doesn't work for everyone. So there must be something in me that needs to be further explored. And while, depending upon where you are on that continuum of more loving and equitable and embracing inclusive relationship with the perceived other, some of these questions can be more illuminating than others. I continue to find places where I still hold racism and all racism is seeing another person and then having some, even if it's subtle, idea of lesser than with that race. And so there's things that can be built in our DNA that I use that loosely, of course, but in our emotional DNA, the things that come from our family, the things that come from our culture. And so I'm learning those things. I'm learning that some of my truths haven't been deep enough to support my vision. So whose truth? Our truth. That's the truth that we're really looking towards that will set us free. And what's true anymore? I think it requires investigation. I don't think I can take anything at face value anymore, including what I believe to be true. I think I need to look deeper. I think we all do. If we really want to engage this evolution that is happening in our world, then I think we all need to go deeper. to find out what's true. And I think, my third question, where does one look for truth? Well, I'm going to look for truth in my vision. I'm going to look for truth in a vision that is big enough and broad enough to support all truths. And I think if each one of us are willing to what are faith's words, if we're willing to be strong and hold tight to a vision, that no one can take that away from us. And that in this time of, the word that keeps coming up for me is fatigue, right? We have pandemic fatigue, we've got Zoom fatigue, we've got internet fatigue. And so I think in this time when it can be very easy for us to sort of, take our eye off the ball and to become to the word that slack, right? Become to slack off from what's important to us because we're tired. That's the time for us to find those places where we can continue to tap into that inspiration and that vision of a world that works for all. So I encourage you to consider those 3 questions this week. To consider what it is that, whose truth is it that will set you free, and what is true, and then to where to look for that truth. To consider those 3 questions, because I do know that the truth will set us all free. That there's no one truth that sets an individual free, but it's really a collective truth that will set us free and remind us and help us to retrieve and reclaim who we really are. We are love and form, and we have come together to learn how to love each other deeply. And so I'm committed to loving those that are easy to love and those that are hard to love, because I know that's where I get inspired. I know that's what leads me to a higher vision. I know that's what leads me to a world that works for all. So let's take a deep breath. And let's go ahead and pray. I know that there is a power and a presence. That power and presence is love. It is wholeness. It is freedom. It is truth. And it seeks to express by means of me. It seeks to have an experience in the world as that truth. And so I lean in and trust whatever's in front of me is there to reveal greater truth. It is there to set me free. It is there to help me to realize my own spiritual magnificence. And so I choose to take actions and to think thoughts and to behave in the world in a way that allows me to reveal this greatest truth. I choose to love. That great question, what do I do? And then the answer to all of those questions is, what would love do? And so in this moment, I know for each one of us that we remember that answer, that when we are in a quandary, when we don't know what to do, when we don't know what the next step is, that we simply trust love and we allow it to lead us to greater freedom, to greater wholeness, to indeed this highest vision, the highest vision that we can hold in our heart and body. I know that everything that is happening in our world today is happening for greater goodness. And so I hold each one who is suffering, each one who is feeling challenged, each one who is feeling their heart broken open, perhaps multiple times, perhaps again and again. I hold you in love. For you were born of love, and you have come to be love. And you can only know love. And I know that it is that love that gives you the strength to look up with your spiritual eyes and to behold a greater truth and a greater evolution. We are strong. And we have incarnated in this time because we have been called to this highest vision. And so I trust for each one that not only are we strong within ourselves, but that we support each other. That it is love that leads the way. And the law just makes it possible. And so I trust. I trust that each one will continue to press into their truth and continue to allow love to illuminate that truth in deeper and greater and more beautiful ways. It is with a surrendered heart that I speak this word, that I know this highest truth for all, and I simply let it go, knowing that it is freedom, that is a state of mind, is created in consciousness first, and then it is experienced. So I simply let it go, and so it is.